Okay, so I'm super excited because in front of me I have both the 14-inch and the new 16-inch MacBook Pro, and I've actually been waiting for these for the past 5 years. You probably know that the previous generation was, well, it had a ton of issues. We've made a couple of videos on those, and these should hopefully solve all of those issues. In this video, we're gonna take a look at the 14-inch MacBook Pro, unbox it, and give you guys my live impressions, do a couple of tests, test the speakers, the screen, a couple of benchmarks, and then in the next video, we'll take a look at the 16-inch and compare it against the 14 and the old 15. Right, so let's unbox the 14-inch. Apple has included this new pull tab, so it should be quite easy. There we go, this is the box. Let's remove the plastic wrap. And I just want to quickly see how it compares the box itself to the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pros. It's a very similar design. We have the front of the MacBook Pros on the box. We have, of course, the notch, which is visible. We have the MacBook Pro branding on the side. Then we have the Apple logo on the right, Apple logo on the left, and then on the back we get a listing of the specs. And by the way, this is the baseline 14-inch model, so the one with an 8-core CPU, a 14-core GPU, and 16 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, so let's open up the box. Okay, the Apple logo is definitely bigger, I can tell that. Wow, this thing is very, very heavy, and I can already see the thickness. Holy smokes. Okay, I'm just gonna put this to the side for just 1 second and see what else we get inside. So of course we get the Designed by Apple in California booklet, and inside of that we get the manual, which tells you, wait, this one shows you the 16-inch model, although this is the 14-inch, so yeah, Apple's attention to detail isn't that great anymore. But yeah, it just tells you the ports and the buttons. Then we have warranty and the safety guide. Then we have the new black Apple stickers. And here's a quick comparison against the previous Apple stickers. So these are the ones that we got with the M1 MacBook Pro. So they're gray to match the space gray color. And these are the old ones, the white ones that we used to get with all the previous Macs. And these black ones actually match the ones that we get with the actual Mac Pro. So these are Pro stickers. And then we get the power adapter, which is the 67-watt one, not the more powerful 96 one that you can buy separately or get for free when you get a 10-core CPU model. And I was actually curious to see how it compares to the M1 MacBook Pro charger. And I don't know if you can tell, but this one is a tiny bit bigger. And the M1 MacBook Pros was a 61-watt power adapter. This one is 67. We then get a power adapter head, and then this is the brand new MagSafe cable. And what's really cool about this is that 1, it is now braided, and 2, you can now remove it from the power adapter. So if this cable breaks, you can just replace the cable itself and you won't have to buy a full power adapter again. And now let me finally take a look at the 14-inch model. So let's wrap it. Whoa, this thing is chunky, and keep in mind, this is the 14-inch model, so first impressions, it is very thick. This is strange. The 14-inch is noticeably thicker, even though from Apple's website, the 14-inch appeared to be thinner, so I'm not sure if that's a typo or if the feet of the new 14-inch are that tall, and yes, they are taller. And in terms of the actual footprint, let's take a look at it too. So it looks like the 14-inch is slightly taller and slightly wider. And I was quite curious to see how it compares the 14-inch to the old 15-inch. So this is not a 16-inch. And in terms of the footprint, as you can probably see, the 15-inch is significantly taller and also significantly wider than the 14-inch. In terms of the thickness, again, the 14-inch is noticeably thicker, but at the same time, the 15-inch used to taper off, so it is thinner towards the ends. Okay, so let's finally open it up. I gotta say, first impressions, I do like the black keyboard. Wow, okay, I can already see the advantages of the mini LED display. I cannot see any grayish blacks at all. Honestly, this looks like an OLED. Yes, we are in a very brightly lit room, and there we go. The notch is visible, it is there. And I gotta say, the bezels are super, super thin. They're actually thinner than I thought, and I'm pretty sure that the notch, even though it's there, it is thinner than the bezel on the old 13-inch. Let me just check that. So there you go. As you can tell, the notch is actually thinner than the entire bezel of the old MacBook Pro. And I've also noticed that the display itself is significantly thicker on the 14-inch model than it used to be on the 13-inch. So take a look at the thickness. Now, in terms of the actual ports, on the old model, we had a headphone jack on the right, and on the new one, we have an HDMI port, we have a Thunderbolt 4 port, and an SD card slot. And then on the other side, we have 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports instead of 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports. We also have the MagSafe and the headphone jack, which is now on the left, which is actually really good if you're right-handed and you used to use cabled headphones, as that cable always got in the way of using my mouse. Let me quickly try out MagSafe for the first time. Oh man, this is just like the old one, and it also has the LED light indicator, so orange when it's charging and green when it's full. I'm really happy that it's back, although I actually don't see myself using this, since you can also use the USB-C ports to charge the MacBook, and it will also charge at the same 50% in 30 minutes charging speed. Now, something interesting to note is that the SD card, when you insert it, it won't actually go all the way in. This is the maximum it will go in. Which means that if you planned on using this to expand your internal storage, I don't think it's a good option unless you're okay with traveling with it like this. And I've also noticed something interesting. First of all, the vent itself is much wider, so the gap between the screen and the chassis, like I can stick my finger in here, whereas in here I cannot really do that. And the second thing that I've noticed is that the vents themselves, I can actually see them. So there's a couple of grills here. So this is the exhaust. So this should give us much better thermals, especially when you're doing intensive tasks on the new model. Okay, now I want to do a quick typing test and see if the keyboard has been changed in any specific ways. So testing the keyboard on the new 14-inch MacBook Pro. Testing keyboard on the old 13-inch M1. And I gotta say, they feel almost the same, but this one actually feels a bit more clicky than this one, so this does indeed feel more rubbery. I'm not sure if they actually changed the material inside the keyboard itself, but of course, that the biggest difference between the two keyboards is that we do no longer have the touch bar, and instead we have individual function keys, which are now the same size as the rest of the keys instead of being the half size that we had before. Now, in terms of the actual screens, take a look at the extra screen real estate that we get on the 14-inch model. So the width is actually about the same, maybe a tiny bit wider, but it is noticeably taller. And as you can tell, the top menu bar is also significantly thicker to match the size of the notch, whereas on the other one, it was significantly thinner. And if I adjust the resolution, the scaling, let me just quickly check this. The menu bar remains the exact same size to match the notch. Yeah, as you can probably tell, if you change the scaling, the menu bar also gets smaller or bigger. Now, comparing the 14-inch to the old 15-inch, you can probably tell that, of course, the 15-inch still has a bigger display, but not by that much. So it's like, what, 1 centimeter taller? But that's about it. And now I want to quickly test and see if the brightness is any different between the two in manual brightness. So let me just try and max it out on both. I gotta say they look about the same to me. Maybe this one is a tiny bit brighter, but oh man, the colors are way more vivid on the 14-inch model. I can easily tell that. This one actually looks quite washed out. And now I want to test and see what's the actual brightness, but when you're watching HDR content. So the new one should go significantly brighter. So Apple says that it goes up to 1600 nits, and I can easily tell. So they're both at max out brightness. The 14-inch is, I would say, about 50% brighter, so that should be about 1000 nits or so. Now I want to do a quick test in terms of the black levels and see if we can actually tell the advantages that the mini LED display provides us. And I can immediately tell that this display looks very, very grayish. Holy smokes, this looks so good. This looks like an OLED display, I gotta say that, compared to the old one, which doesn't look as bright. So this one is not only brighter, but yeah, the black levels are significantly better. What I want to do now is I want to turn off the lights and see if I can actually see any blooming on the mini LED one. Okay, so I can see some blooming, but it's not really that bad. So comparing it to the LCD, it looks significantly better. Like, this is such a big difference. Honestly, like, if you told me that this was an OLED display, I would probably believe you. So what about the 120 Hz refresh rate? Is it noticeable? Well, just scrolling through YouTube, I can definitely tell that it is smoother on the 14-inch model. Now, oh, just crashed. We just had a crash. Okay, now we're back to the video. We're back up and running, and I gotta say, when you're scrolling through YouTube, I can definitely tell that this one is much smoother than the previous 60 Hz M1. I don't think you're gonna notice it that much as on a mobile phone or even on a tablet, but it is 100% there. Now, I was really curious to see how the notch actually works, like what happens when you drag your mouse like this. Oh, so it goes, okay, so it comes out on the other side, but it doesn't actually teleport the mouse. So the mouse is still there. Okay, so it's not too bad. And then when I full screen something, like an app, then the notch is essentially gone. And I wish you could actually enable this all the time so that the top bar was always black, because this looks so nice, honestly, like having the menus on the left and on the right hand side, the icons. Something else that I've noticed is that the default scaling is significantly higher on the new models. So if you don't change the scaling yourself and you just leave it to default for display, then essentially everything will be smaller and you would have more screen space on this model compared to the old one. Of course, you can change the scaling to, this one goes up to 1800 by 1169 compared to 1680 by 1050. Now, something else that I noticed in terms of the displays is that the chin is actually taller and thicker on the new model than compared to the old one, even though we do not longer have the MacBook Pro branding on the 14-inch model like we did on the M1. It is on the back now, as you can tell. It is engraved into the MacBook, and it's also quite a big font, so it's very bold. And this is a front-facing camera test and a microphone test on the old M1 MacBook Pro. And now this is a front-facing camera test and a microphone test of the new 14-inch MacBook Pro. And now let's do a very quick speaker test. So this is the 13-inch M1.
I don't know if I'll ever go back. All the ways that you make me, put me off on the things I like.
So the 14-inch is a bit louder, but the main difference is just the quality. Like, this is significantly bassier than the 13-inch M1, and it was also way clearer. Hopefully you guys were able to tell that. And now I quickly want to run a Geekbench test to see how much faster the new 14-inch is, even the baseline model one compared to the base 13-inch M1. Okay, so they're both done, and something really interesting happened. So if you take a look at the single core score, the 14-inch model is slightly faster, but not by that much. But in terms of the multi-core, the 14-inch model is over 2,000 points higher. Now, the interesting thing here is that this is also an 8-core processor, same as the M1 is. But the main difference between the two is that the M1 has 4 high-performance cores and 4 low-performance cores, whereas this one has 6 high-performance cores and 2 low-performance cores, and that's why we get a significantly higher multi-core. Okay, and now I want to run a quick GFX bench test. This is the Aztec Ruins test, which is, by the way, extremely demanding, and it literally looks like a game. As you can tell, the graphics in this test, it looks like Tomb Raider, and I can already tell that the frame rate on the new MacBook Pro is noticeably higher than on the M1. Okay, and they both finished. The M1 got 41.2 frames per second. However, the 14-inch base M1 Pro got 65 frames per second. So more than 20 frames per second higher than the M1. So if you plan on doing any gaming, then this will be quite a bit faster. Of course, keep in mind this is the baseline. We will have way more models in the studio to test in the upcoming days. But of course, that this was a very quick test, and we'll actually have a dedicated Zone of Tech performance analysis, which is a new series that we've been working on for many months. So we actually built a scripting tool from scratch that runs through multiple tests on its own to show you real-time graphs that display the CPU frequency, the GPU frequency, temperatures, and it will be the most comprehensive performance test that we've ever done. And it comes out next week. So definitely stay tuned, subscribe for those videos. We'll have a bunch. Like I said, this was a very quick first impressions with my thoughts and just a quick test to see how good the new MacBook Pro 14-inch is. And in terms of my first impressions, I do love it, loads. Don't forget that we still have the 16-inch model to check out, which I'm gonna do in the next video. But until then, I'm Daniel, this has been ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.